Hey folks, this is your host, Paul Winkler. Thank you for listening to the show today. Before we get into the content, I want to tell you about a new workshop I'm hosting called Politics and Portfolios: How to Invest During Election Season. You can register for it at paulwinkler.com/politics. A lot of people are worried about the market this year, and I want to help you know what to do. We're going to look at historical data and academic research to explain how markets behave in election years, and we'll use easy-to-read charts and graphs. I'll be live on Friday, February 23rd at 12 o'clock. But if you can't make it live, register anyway, and we'll send you a replay link, so go check it out at paulwinkler.com/politics. Now, here's your show.
Welcome to the Investor Coaching Show, a podcast to help you get an insider's view of the financial world and escape common investment traps. We look at the financial news of the day and help you make sense of it so you can relax about money. And here's your host, Paul Winkler.
And welcome to the Investor Coaching Show. I am Paul Winkler, talking the world of money and investing. And we talk about the things that are going on out there. We're talking about things that might help you out with some of the things that you might be dealing with. And that's exactly what we're going to do this hour. We're going to go off the beaten path, something I don't normally talk a whole lot about. But this is of interest to people, especially, and you might be grandparents too, that are trying to help your kids out with this regarding how do you get the kid into school and pay for it, especially when they're getting close to college age and they're going, we got to think about this, and maybe you didn't do any planning for it. So we'll talk a little bit about that here with Jacob Lagesse. He is from Trevecca University. He is the director of New Student Financial Aid. So, because we're just kind of playing around with this idea, Jacob, of going into this topic of college because, we talk about 529s. We talk about saving for college. We talk about, it used to be the Coverdell Education Savings Accounts was a bigger deal than it is now. It's not as big of a deal because of the limitations, how much money you can put into it. And I'm sure that you're going to probably jump into a little bit of that. But I think mainly what we're wanting to talk about is just the experience of preparing your kid for college. So typically when are parents coming to you and going, hey, I need to figure out what to do, and what kind of guidance are you giving them?
Yeah, typically I'm starting with families junior year, senior year, right? Summer heading into senior year. Sometimes I get that ambitious family and it's freshman or sophomore year. But very rarely. It's typically by junior year.
Usually they wait that long.
They wait till the end, typically. But that's okay. That's okay. We work with them through the process. And, I think the biggest question that they ask me when I get there is, what do we do? Where do I even begin? How do we afford this? And so that's kind of where we come into play to help kind of talk them through some of those avenues they can choose, like scholarships and federal aid and things like that, to help them work through that process.
Okay, so I know one of the things that's a real pain for a lot of people is that form you just mentioned.
Yes.
So why don't we start there?
Yeah.
Because no, what is that? Explain to people that don't know what it is, and how it works and what role it has.
Yeah. So we're talking about the FAFSA, right? You got your free application for federal student aid. Okay. And so any student and parent, right, who's a U.S. citizen, right, lives in the United States, is eligible to qualify to apply for this, right? And so it doesn't cost anything. So there's no harm in filling this out. So I encourage every family that's about to send a student to college to fill this form out. Essentially, what it does for a family is it may get you some free money, right? And when I say free, I mean things like Pell Grant. And so Pell Grant's a need-based grant that's given by the government. It doesn't cost the family anything. They don't have to pay that back after the student graduates. And so that's really your biggest benefit, is trying to find some free money through that, as well as some small student loans that a student can get through the federal government.
Okay, so now the Pell Grant, What are the criteria in general? I mean, when we're looking at qualifying for something like that, are we talking like really, really bad poverty level?
Not necessarily. So they do look at the poverty line when it comes to how much they're going to give out. So this year you can get up to $7,400 in free money through the Pell Grant. So it could be anywhere from $0 to $7,400. And so that's going to be based off of mom and dad's income, some of their assets, right? Maybe their investments. There's been some changes this year with that. And I would encourage our families to do some research on that a little bit deeper with some of the changes they're making on the FAFSA. But they're mainly looking at the income for the family and their financial.
Okay, so what types of assets are looked at?
Yeah, so the one that I say is not looked at for families to know is their house. The home you live in does not count as an asset to the FAFSA, and that's a big mistake I see a lot of families do.
So get a really big house and have no savings anywhere else, and you're fine.
Right, that's right. That's right. You're good. You can live in $1 million home. It doesn't matter.
Oh man!
But some things that would be included as an asset, unfortunately, would be a 529 plan. Right. So families who have a 529 plan, that's considered an asset to the FAFSA. One of the changes they're making this year, though, is that if it's a 529 plan and the student going to school is not the one benefiting from it, say it's maybe for another one of their children.
So another person is a beneficiary because you can choose the beneficiary of it. So they are looking at who the beneficiary is.
Correct. Yep. So if you got a 529 plan for Sally and Joe, and Sally's still an 8th grader and Joe's going to be a freshman in college, they're not going to count Sally's 529 plan as an asset, right? They'll only count the student going to college.
Can you switch it from the one back to the other temporarily for that?
That's a gray area.
It's a gray area. All right, forget it. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to put you on this spot.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So, all right, remind me where we're going from.
Oh, so you're talking about the filling out that form. You're saying that not everybody has to fill out that form is basically what you're saying. But I remember going, my wife went through that process. Yeah. I'm the financial guy in the family, but my wife had to go through the process. It was like, oh my God. I was watching what she had to put on that form. It was just making me cringe.
Insane. Now, I will say, and for all the families that are filling this out this year, I worked with a family yesterday filling out the FAFSA with them, and it is completely different.
Oh, really?
It took us about 25 minutes all in.
That is a big difference.
Huge difference. I've had families, I tell them, buy a pizza for the night and sit tight because it's going to take you 3 hours, right? It's completely changed.
Right.
One of the biggest changes for this is right at the beginning, you give consent that the government's going to link your taxes automatically for you. So it really eliminates that whole financial aid questionnaire down to 4 or 5ve questions. Typically.
Oh, now that's fascinating. So that's fascinating. So that was, that
big
was
change.
Huge time waster, going into
you had
that.
families bringing their W-2s and their 1040 line by line, back and
nightmare.
forth.
Nightmare. Okay. Yeah. So when we're looking at that's one form that you're saying, fill that out. And then I was shocked at how many different scholarships there are out there. Now, both my kids went to Trevecca. And, I was just shocked at the number of different things out there.
Yeah.
Where do kids typically look, or parents probably more likely start look? But my son was one, both my sons, they were looking for themselves as to where scholar, and I was surprised at how many of them they found out there that where do people typically go for that kind of thing?
Besides the FAFSA grants and the state stuff, the two pieces are your institutional aid. So whatever college they're looking at, right? What scholarships they offer. And the other one is what I call outside or private scholarships, right? So that's scholarships from your local community, or there's some national scholarships. I encourage students to start with your local stuff. It's a lot easier to get a scholarship that 50 students are applying for versus 5,000 students, right? The best place, in my opinion, is checking with the local high school. A lot of times you can check with your guidance counselor, maybe front office lady, right? They'll have a running list of the scholarships in the community, maybe 15, 20 scholarships that these students may be eligible to apply for. So
is there someplace online that people typically look as well?
I've had some students find success using fastweb.com. Not a sponsor for that, right? I've just had students.
I don't know what is that.
It's a scholarship kind of questionnaire thing. So you fill it out. It's like a dating site, but for scholarships, right? So the student's going to put in, their year in school, ethnicity, right? What they want to major in, what state they live in, and the website will generate scholarships that would make that student eligible for. So
that seems like it would be pretty handy.
It's handy. I've had students find success with that. College Board's a good avenue, but I do still think hands down finding stuff locally is always the best option. So, and it's a little bit easier to figure out what's legit, right? Is this a real scholarship? When you're looking on the internet, it's kind of hard to be giving out that information while you're online. So I can see the trust issue on that too. But
right. So there are also the lottery type things. What, kind of explain that, because for some people I've had them use that where they may go to another university for the first couple of years, then they transfer out to a Trevecca or something like that afterward. Yeah. How does that whole program work?
Yeah. So we're talking, this would be the Tennessee Hope Scholarship or Tennessee Promise. So this is really only for people in the state of Tennessee. If you have listeners that aren't in Tennessee, it's great to check with their state to see what they offer from a lottery standpoint scholarship. Tennessee Hope, you got to have a 3.0 GPA in high school or 21 ACT. So one or the other. So if I'm talking to a family whose student's a sophomore or junior, my push to them is by the end of senior year, you need to make sure that student has a 3.0 if they can't reach the 21, right? Or if they have the 21, they're set. But that's a big piece.
So I can imagine. Well, you before we got on, you actually were telling a story about something where somebody didn't have enough class. Go through that again.
Yeah,
I don't want to steal your thunder, but
you're good.
Talk through that.
Yeah, I talked to a senior just yesterday, and they have a 2.85 GPA. They only have 3 classes left in senior year. Even to get all A's, the odds of that going to a 3.0 are probably pretty slim, right?
Yeah.
And if they're sitting at an 18 ACT, maybe not the best test taker, they don't have any chance of getting Tennessee Hope now, right? So if we can educate the families to know about this as a freshman or a sophomore, it gives them time to make sure that their students are completing that classwork, shooting for that 3.0 or that 21 to guarantee the free money. Right now, it's $4,500 your first 2 years, and then another $5,700 the last 2 years, and money that is completely free. So
yeah, that's pretty significant.
Yeah.
and typically, so is that covering most of what they need in the first year?
It depends where you go to school. With a school like Trevecca, for example, we'll take that Tennessee Hope and we'll stack it with the student's institutional scholarships, like your academic or your leadership scholarship. If you go to a community college route, you have programs like the Tennessee Promise, which is similar to the Hope, that will completely cover that. So I see a lot of students who will do the 2 years free at community college, a Nashville State of all state, right? And then transfer over to a 4-year school to finish off. So
typically, what does it cost to attend? If you look at various places. I'm so out of touch on that.
No, yeah, that's okay. The big difference is you got 3 types. You got your state schools, right? 4-year state school, 4-year private school, and then you got your community colleges. In Tennessee, you essentially can go to community college pretty much free as long as you're completing some of these programs.
With those scholarships that we were just referring to, that will cover.
There's a thing called the Tennessee Promise. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it allows
to some extent.
Yeah, it allows a student to go to college.
Go ahead, explain it. It doesn't matter if I'm familiar with it or not.
I got you.
Other people are going to be going, explain, please.
Tennessee Hope's a great option. Tennessee Promise is a great option for students who don't qualify for Hope. Because Promise, there's no GPA requirement. There's no test score requirement. There's some meetings involved in community
So no
service.
test scores as far as
ACT,
SAT. Do they still use the SAT in many states? That's what I did. But that we're going back. We're looking at that when Methuselah was going to school.
So Tennessee's primarily ACT, right? But schools in Illinois, they're big SAT still. California still SAT. Right. So I still see both quite a bit.
Maybe New York. That's where I went. So
that makes sense. Yeah. So, but Promise is a great option. So if you got a student,
so they don't have to have the test scores. Let's go back through that again because I want to make sure that was clear. They don't have to have test scores, and they don't have to have a grade point average is not as big of a deal. So what is that? How much do they get, and what does that look like?
Yeah, there's a monetary value to it by the state of Tennessee. They're looking at all the community colleges, kind of averaging out what it would cost. So they'll pay out per credit hour. And so typically what I see is
does it vary?
Yes, it varies. So if you take 12 credit hours, you'll get less money than a student taking 16 credit hours for Promise. It's not a set amount.
Okay.
But that would essentially cover your community college costs, those payouts, right? Based off of how many credit hours you're doing.
So is that everybody gets that?
Yeah, as long as you fill out the FAFSA.
Okay,
apply.
so it's going to be dependent. So basically what you're saying, it's going to be dependent upon the financial needs of the family?
No.
So not at all?
One of the qualifications for state aid is you have to fill out the FAFSA.
That's just...
So even if mom and dad make $1 million, they could still get the Promise money.
That's surprising. Okay, so I did not know that. All right.
It's really different. So Tennessee Hope, you fill out the FAFSA, you got to have the grades, right? Mm-hmm. Tennessee Promise, you fill out the FAFSA, you go to a Tennessee Promise meeting, and then you complete some community service hours, and you have to go into an associate's degree. As long as you go into an associate's degree, those are some of the pieces you'd have to do to finish that qualification out.
So that's interesting. So doing some community service, and I've seen kids do that and go, hey, I need to do so much of this. Yeah, very much so. Okay, so that's why they do that. Okay, got it.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, so tell you what, let's do this. Let's take a quick break and come right back, and we're going to talk a little bit about the questions that we want to ask when you're sitting down with the universities. I think that's going to be, important to talk a little bit about that. I got a list of things.
Yeah,
so we'll go. We'll take it from there. You're listening to the Investor Coaching Show. I am here with Jacob Lagesse, and he is Director of New Student Financial Aid over at Trevecca, and just talking about getting a kid into college and the things that you need to know. And thanks for tuning in to the Investor Coaching Podcast. Now, you may be one of these people that's been listening and realizing, wow, investing, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye, and financial planning, tax laws constantly changing, and recognizing that maybe you might need some help in this area, but you don't want just anybody to help you out. So we have 10 offices in the Middle Tennessee area, and everything we do is fee only. We align our interests with your interests. So you can get an initial 15-minute phone call with any one of our offices just by going to paulwinkler.com/call. That's it. Every one of the offices is run by somebody with 20 plus years experience. They're all degreed planners. They all have academic backgrounds in investing, and you can get the help that you need. So if you want to set up a complimentary phone consultation, just go to paulwinkler.com/call. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Yeah, that's appropriate. You're listening to the Investor Coaching Show. Jacob Lagesse from Trevecca, Director of New Student Financial Aid, is hanging out with me here in the studio, and we're talking about college education, and it's going to take money. So I guess that's a good question, Jacob, is, what are the how are we going to afford this is the question that people ask. Yeah. And you said that there are 4 pockets of money, and let's just walk through that a little bit.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about some of these in depth, but I think it's great to highlight. There's really 4 pieces when a family asks me, how do we afford this? I tell them, 1, institutional scholarships, scholarships from the universities. 2,
from the university itself. Okay.
Maybe based off of merit, right? And then 2, you got your federal and state aid. So the FAFSA, and then your Tennessee money or whatever state you live in.
Can you talk a little bit more about institutional aid?
Yeah.
What is it, and what are the criteria? What are they looking for?
Yeah. So one of the big changes that shifted in higher education was test scores, right? When COVID hit, students were not taking tests, and that kind of stuck. So I have a lot of schools out there now that I see are test optional or test preferred.
So that's still going on.
Still going on. And we're a couple of years past COVID now, and it's kind of stuck. So I see students that will get awarded academic scholarships based off of maybe their high school GPA or their test score, whatever benefits that student more. So that's one thing I always encourage parents to look at when they're looking at colleges, is figure out what kind of academic scholarships they offer and kind of see the tiers, right? Maybe you got a student who has a 24 and that's a 6,000 academic, say. Well, maybe.
What does that mean? It's 24.
24 ACT. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
That.
Because
So
I knew what you were talking about, but somebody else might be missing that.
So maybe they
or
have
a 24 or what?
So maybe they have a 24 ACT, right? And that qualified them at some college for $6,000 in academic money.
Okay.
Well, maybe the next tier is 26. And that could maybe get them $10,000. So I encourage our families, as they're sophomores and juniors looking at these schools, figure out what kind of goals that student needs to be setting to maximize their scholarship package. Right?
And they can take the test more than once.
A lot of schools will take it multiple times. At Trevecca, for example, we'll take it all the way, your highest test score through your senior year, the April test date. So all the way through April test date of your senior year. So they have multiple opportunities to try to keep bumping up that scholarship package.
Okay.
So, yeah. Other things I encourage students to be involved in with institutional aid would be maybe church involvement, right? Or community service involvement, school involvement, right? Maybe
my son, actually, I can tell a personal story.
Okay,
One of my sons is actually, you know what he's doing? Actually, literally, as we speak, he's doing tornado aid volunteering right now. And he's already out of Trevecca. He's not doing it because he wants to get a scholarship. He's already got a lot of his scholarship from Trevecca through that. Literally doing volunteer work because he'd always be at these little homeless shelters and you know, food pantries and those types of things.
Definitely.
So I can
schools
I can attest to that. Apparently, I had no idea that they did.
And I tell families, don't be afraid to have the student brag on themselves when they're filling out these applications.
It's a really good point.
They want to know, are you the captain of the baseball team, right? Are you part of the NHS, the National Honor Society? Are you in the student government? Like what is your student doing in their high school years?
That's super good. So that's I'm so glad we went more into depth on that institutional aid. And then other types of things that we look at.
Outside scholarships would be a third pocket, the outside aid. We've talked about that. And then the last one is the hardest part. That's the family contribution, right? And that's your own pocket.
Right.
So we want families to maximize on the institutional scholarships, the outside scholarships, the federal aid. So that fourth pocket, your pocket, is hopefully the one that hurts the less, right? So,
and there are certain things that you would look at that count more toward that, you know, student assets in the student's name versus assets in the parent's name and those types of things. Can you speak to that, any?
Yeah. So when you're filling out the FAFSA and stuff, the student and the parent have to put in what their financial aid looks like, and so they'll ask questions like
what their assets look like.
They'll ask, did the student file taxes, right? What is the student's cash savings in their bank account, right? What is their total assets, right? Do they have investments? Right? And they'll ask those same things for the parents too. Now, a lot of it, they're really looking at mom and dad, but students' financial aid comes into play with that.
Hey, this is Paul Winkler. Hope you enjoyed today's edition of the Investor Coaching Show. You want to learn more about what we do, go to our website, paulwinkler.com. You can watch some of the videos there, and if you're not already a client, you can set up a free initial consultation. Until next time, I'm Paul Winkler, reminding you that I believe that more educated investors are more confident investors, and confident investors are more successful investors. Have a great one. Advisory services offered through Paul Winkler, Inc., an SEC-registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced and information provided in this material are for general informational purposes only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what investments are appropriate for you, please consult with a financial advisor. Paul Winkler, Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax or legal advisor regarding your particular situation.